Hi, my name is Brandon, and I'm an alcoholic and addict in recovery. Going to start out today by reading straight from Living Sober, and we're talking about getting out of the if trap. One AA member says, "We drunks and drug users are very iffy people. During our drinking and using days, we were often full of ifs as well as liquor and drugs. A lot of our daydreams started out if only, and we were continually saying to ourselves that we wouldn't have gotten drunk or used if something or other hadn't happened, or that we wouldn't have any drinking or drug problem at all if only. We all followed up that last if with our own explanations or excuses for our use. Each of us thought, I wouldn't be drinking or using this way if it wasn't for my wife or husband or lover, if I had just had more money and not so many debts, if it wasn't for all these family problems, if I wasn't under so much pressure, if I had a better job or a better place to live, if people understood me, if the state of the world wasn't so lousy, if human beings were kinder, more considerate, more honest, if everybody else didn't expect me to drink, if it wasn't for the war, any war, and on and on and on." Looking back at this kind of thinking and our resultant behavior, we see now that we were really letting circumstances outside ourselves control much of our lives. I'm going to read that one again because it's critical stuff. Looking back at this kind of thinking and our resultant behavior, we see now that we were really letting circumstances outside ourselves control much of our lives. I was a huge victim of this if thinking. If only if only something else would happen, I would stop drinking. And I placed all these conditions on my, what I considered future moderation. One of the biggest ones that I had was, once I have a child, I will stop drinking so much, because you can't drink. You can't drink a lot when you have a kid. That's what I told myself. You can't drink a six pack at night and you know take care of a kid. And I'm here to tell you, you shouldn't do that, but you can do that. You may not do a good job of taking care of that kid. You may put that kid in danger by doing that. But it is physically possible to do that. And if you are an addict, you will do it even if you think it's a bad idea. And that's what they're talking about here. Circumstances outside of ourselves controlling our behavior. So, a lot of times when we stop drinking, these ifs, these what ifs, these things, these conditions that we placed on the continual use of drugs or alcohol start to go away. So they say when we first stop drinking or using, a lot of those circumstances recede to their proper places in our minds. At the personal level, many of them really clear up as soon as we start saying sober, and we begin to see what we may be able to do about the others someday. Meanwhile, our life is much, much better sober, no matter what else may be going on. But then, after a sober while, for some of us, there comes a time when a new discovery slaps us in the face. That same old iffy thinking habit of our drinking days has, without our seeing it, attached itself to not drinking. Unconsciously, we have placed conditions on our sobriety. We have begun to think sobriety is just fine if everything goes well or if nothing goes wrong. In effect, we are ignoring the biochemical, unchangeable nature of our ailment. Alcoholism respects no ifs. So we get into sobriety and it feels great. And if we're doing things, certain ways and life is, going relatively okay, we feel really good about it. And we start to identify those good feelings with sobriety. And we start to think, even if it's unconscious, we start to think, I'll keep doing this if this continues like this. If I keep feeling like this, then sobriety's worth it. And you'll even hear people say things like this in meetings. If this is what sobriety's all about, then I'm all for it. We got to be careful of that thinking, because that's placing conditions on our own sobriety. We need to be willing to engage in sobriety and recovery no matter how we feel. Whether we feel good, whether we feel bad, whether we're anxious, whether somebody died, whether we got maimed, whether we're in the middle of the worst financial crisis of our lives, whether there are bombs going off literally all around us. We have to be willing to engage in sobriety, not because it makes life better, but because it's the right thing to do. If we engage in it because it makes life better for us, that's placing a condition on sobriety that is really easy to go back on when life starts going poorly. Because life will go poorly. You live long enough, life's going to suck at some point. You're going to have problems to deal with. You're going to get sick. Someone you love is going to get sick. Someone you love is going to die. Something bad is going to happen. And you have to be willing to engage in sobriety in spite of those things happening. So it's really important that we frame our commitment to sobriety the right way, and not saying, I'm doing this because it feels good. That's why we used to do things. That's why we used to do drugs. We did drugs because it felt good. You don't want to start doing sobriety just because it feels good. You don't want to stay committed to recovery because it feels good. You want to do it because it's right. It's the right thing to do. And you engage in it because it's the right thing to do, no matter what else is going on in your life. It's very important to draw that distinction. Now, the benefit of recovery and spiritual foundation in recovery is that often it will feel good. And often you will feel better in recovery than you felt for years in your addiction. And that's good, and you should embrace that and be grateful for it. I'm not saying this to devalue that goodness in recovery. But what I'm saying is that we can't do it because of that. We can't do it because of the good times. Because then when things get bad, it's going to be that much easier to turn our backs on the recovery we've worked so hard to maintain in our lives. So, really important to recognize that placing any kind of conditions on your recovery puts it in danger. And I'll read just a couple of other things real quick. It says, somewhere buried in a hidden convolution of our gray matter, of our brains, we had a tiny reservation, a condition on our sobriety, and it was just waiting to pounce. We were going along thinking, yep, sobriety is great, and I intend to keep at it. We didn't even hear the whispered reservation, that is, if everything keeps going my way. Those ifs we cannot afford. We have to stay sober no matter how life treats us, no matter whether non-alcoholics appreciate our sobriety or not. We have to keep our sobriety independent of everything else, not entangled with any people, not hedged by any possible cop-out or conditions. Over and over we have found we cannot stay sober long just for the sake of a wife, husband, children, lover, parents, other relative, or friend, not for the sake of a job, nor to please a boss, or doctor, or judge, or creditor, not for anyone other than ourselves. Tying up our sobriety to any person, even another recovered alcoholic, or to any circumstance is foolish and dangerous. When we think, I'll stay sober if, or I won't drink because of, fill in any circumstance other than our own desire to be well for health's own sake. We unwittingly set ourselves up to drink when the condition or person or circumstance changes, and any of these may change at any moment. Independent, unaffiliated with anything else, our sobriety can grow strong enough to enable us to cope with anything and everybody. Really important stuff here. I can't say enough about this section. I could keep going on, but the most important thing to take away is we have to frame sobriety and recovery in a very specific way. We're not doing it to get a certain feeling out of it. We're not doing it to gain a particular thing. We're doing it because it's the right thing to do. And we've got to do it for ourselves, not for work, not for wife, not for husband, not for kids, not for any of these things that could go away in the blink of an eye, you know? I mean, I hate to put it this way, but if you get sober for your kids and something terrible happens to your children, are you going to stay sober? Think about that. We've got to be sober because it's the right thing to do so that when life's crises crop up, we can stay sober. It's a lifetime thing that we can do if we stay committed to it because it's the right thing to do. So, hope this one helps. I love this section. This is on page 61 through 63 of Living Sober. Really cool section if you're looking to really plumb the depths of why am I sober, and do I have the commitment to it, and am I doing it for the reasons I really need to be doing it. Hope you all have a great day. I'll be back here tomorrow with more.